What is up, everyone? Welcome to another video. Glad you can be here. Today, we're going to look at Cine Prime lenses versus autofocus. I have a small set of manual focus, reasonably budget-friendly cinema glass, and we're going to compare them with probably one of Sony's best-selling lenses, I reckon, the 2470 G Master. So let's talk about Sony autofocus lenses just for a minute. They are designed for speed, accuracy, and reliability. And when it comes down to it, Sony has nailed all of those aspects, particularly with the G Master range of lenses. They do have a huge catalog of lenses to suit most budget sizes. More often than not, I have a 24-70 or a 70-200 stuck on the front of my camera. And for run and gun style of shooting, it's hard to match their performance and quality. But sometimes I'm looking to slow down and get a little more creative. And lens choice can make a huge impact on the overall look of your image. And that's what I want to look at today when we're comparing these two types of lenses. Now, when it comes to cinema glass, there really are no limits to what's available with the right budget. But finding out what will suit your project best is the important thing. For myself, I opted for a fairly budget-friendly option for my Cine Primes, and I've gone with the SLR Magic Micro Primes. They're small, affordable, they look fantastic, and they have a native E-mount that fits right on the front of my FX3. So far, I've managed to pick up a 35mm and a 75mm, and those are the two that we're going to be comparing today alongside the Sony 24-70 G Master. So let's dive right into some comparisons. Right now, we're on the 24-70 G Master. We're set at f2.8 and we are at 35mm. Let's go ahead and switch this out, and we're going to throw on the SLR Magic. We're going to throw on that 35mm, and we're going to see straight away what the differences are, how that looks. We're not going to change anything in terms of lighting. We're obviously going to match the apertures on both of these lenses, and we're just going to see kind of comparing the two side by side. Style, look, feel, how does it render the image itself, colors, skin, softness, sharpness, how does it really look? So we're going to go ahead into our first swap onto some cinema glass. Here we go. Well, we're now looking through that SLR Magic Micro Prime 35mm. It's set at T2.8, which is very, very similar to f2.8. When it comes to the difference between f-stop and t-stop, t-stop is referring to the amount of actual light measured that hits the sensor. Now, these SLR Magic lenses, they are super rugged, built out of an all-metal housing. Now, obviously, the one drawback with these lenses is that they're a manual focus lens. Now, I say that's a drawback. As I said before, it just means that you kind of need to slow down a little bit more. You have to prepare your shots. If you're a solo shooter like myself, I have to make sure that my shot is in focus, and that can sometimes be a little hard to do when you're shooting on your own. Now, it's really hard to tell on my small little monitors how that's looking, but as far as I can tell, it's looking really nice, and it'll be interesting to see in post the differences in these shots, the sharpness, the general quality, whether there's more flair, more spice on these cinema lenses. I initially bought these because I'd seen that they had a little extra character, and they were nice and small enough that I could carry them around with me just in case I wanted to use them. So let's go ahead, we'll switch between the 35 from the G Master and the 35 from the SLR Magic. We want to see the differences between the two, whether the colors are the same. Obviously focus, I'm hoping that I've nailed the focus, so that might play into the sharpness of the images side by side. But I'm expecting that they show fairly similar results. Bear in mind they are exactly the same focal length. We're shooting at exactly the same aperture. I'm imagining that they will look fairly close. But you let me know what you think in terms of these two lenses. Which one you prefer? Do you prefer the G Master? Is it sharper? Or do you prefer the SLR Magic, the 35mm? All right, let's go ahead and switch back to the G Master lens, and we're gonna go for a different focal length this time. All right, so now we're back over on the 24-70. We are sitting at 70mm on that lens now. And yeah, it's looking good. I like shots like this. There's not too much I can say about this really. It's at f2.8 still. All the lights are the same. Nothing's changed in the room, but we are just sitting at 70mm. Ideally, I Probably would like a little bit more distance between myself and the camera, but the size of the room that we're sitting in kind of doesn't permit that. So this is what we've got. I like it though. I really like getting up close and personal. This 70mm really just gets right in there. So I'll be really interested to see. On the SLR Magic, we've only got 75mm, so it's going to be a tiny bit more punched in, but let's go ahead and switch that over now and see how that's looking as well. All right, so this is that 75mm on the SLR Magic. I had to move a little bit. I had to move the camera ever so slightly just to get a slightly more pleasing frame. Focusing on these as a solo shooter is really annoying. But if I wasn't the subject, if I was behind the camera, the focus wheels on them, the focus gears on these lenses are really, really nice. They're really nice to use. They're small, and I never feel like I'm hunting for focus if I'm behind the camera. They're really nice. It doesn't seem difficult to find a point where it's nice and tack sharp, especially when you're stopped down slightly from the wide open, which would be T1.5, I think, on these lenses. All the way now we're stopped to T2.8. So we're the same settings as we have been on the other lenses. But this is 75mm compared to the 70 of the Sony G Master. So it'll be really interesting to see how these are looking, which one we feel is more pleasing, which one we feel looks nicer, and then whether the trade-off of manual focus to autofocus, whether that trade-off is actually worth it, whether we get more out of the manual focus lenses, whether they give us more character, whether they give us more feeling, or whether actually just the use, the reliability of those Sony autofocus lenses, whether that just beats out the rest of it. So we'll make sure we're flicking back and forth between those two shots right now, just to give us an idea of the difference between the 70mm on the Sony and the 75mm from the SLR Magic. And let us know what you think. Let us know which one you prefer out of these two shots. And before we go, you know we love a bonus shot. So we are not using the SLR Magics. I actually don't have a 50mm in the SLR Magic. I would like a 50mm from SLR Magic, but I actually have a really old school Canon FD mount 50mm. It's off of an old film camera. We're able to adapt that FD mount to Sony E, and it's a full frame lens. So we get 50mm, and this lens actually goes down to f1.8. But we've got this stopped down to f2.8, and man, these old school lenses look really, really nice. 50mm is such a nice focal length as well. So if I really think that those SLR Magic Primes are worth their money, then I think I should pick up a 50mm as well. But this 50mm, old school Canon 50mm, is a really nice lens. I think it's really sharp. The out of focus regions on this lens are really, really pleasing. I really enjoy shooting on this lens when I'm out run and gun. It flares so well in the sunlight, so if it's nice and bright outside, this lens just comes into its own. I've shot some really, really nice stuff with the dogs, out in the parks, out in the fields with this lens, and I just love it. So we'll quickly jump over for the sake of the tests. We're gonna throw the Sony G Master back on. We're gonna put that in at 50mm and see what we feel the differences are between this, a really old school vintage Canon FD lens, and an autofocus lens. So here we are, back on the Sony, back on the 2470 G Master. We're rolling at 50mm, and I tell you, one of the best things about autofocus lenses is just the fact that you can move around, we can look straight at the camera. That autofocus it's flawless, it's faultless. Sony autofocus is unreal. And so that's what it comes down to, really, I think. When we're looking at cinema glass or not cinema glass, autofocus, manual focus, I genuinely think that is one of the most important factors for you. At least for me it is anyway. The ease of use on those Sony lenses, on these Sony lenses, is just so good. When it comes to setting up these kind of shots, for me, that is what makes the difference. Going between a manual focus lens and trying to set up these shots, it's difficult. It's hard to do. So it'll be really interesting to see the trade-offs, whether the image looks nicer, whether it's more pleasing on those cinema lenses, or whether actually just Sony know what they're doing. Sony have been getting it right. So again, we'll flick between the two. We'll flick between that old Canon FD lens. We'll switch to the Sony G Master lens. We'll switch back and forth. Just see which one we think looks nicer. I have a feeling the out of focus elements on the Canon FD lens are going to look really pleasing. When I was looking at it on the monitor, strangely, the FD lens, even though it was at 2.8, that Canon lens looked darker. It was at f2.8, just the same as the Sony lens. But I'll be really interested to see how that comes out. And yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know which one of those two, whether you prefer the vintage look of that old Canon lens, or whether you think the Sony just comes in with it in terms of it being autofocus. All right, well, thanks so much for joining. If you found any of this at all helpful or informative or useful, please drop a comment. Let me know what was helpful, what was useful, what you enjoyed. Let me know what you like. Please, if you're not a subscribed member of the channel, please consider subscribing. It will mean you'll get notified when we post a new video, and it just helps support the channel. So with all that said, thanks for being here. I love you. I'll catch you in the next one.